Vanakkam and welcome to another installation of that Drink and Smoke series. And in this video, as more or less preluded in the last video with from the Devi Mahatam, we are going into the mahanirvana. And in this book, we are going into chapter 5, which is more or less called Mantra and Purifications. And in this chapter, we see where it mentions the offerings, right? How to purify the offerings of wine tama, liquid tama, as and they mention, Maduka wine, which is from the Maduka flowers, the sap Maduka flowers. They mention rice wine, they mention molasses wine. Also in this chapter, we see where Ma is offered fish, and there are different categories of what she likes to less to what she likes least amount, right? All this is no difference with the wines also, right? This is no difference, and Maduka wine made from the sap or from the flowers itself is what is considered number one. Rice wine would be second, and molasses actually is third. So we see in the tantras or the agamas where they mention that aspect of offering alcohol and that aspect of fermented juice. We see where fermented juice also played a part, or wine played a part in the Devi Mahatam with Durga Mata when she was on the battlefield, because she was giving a cup with fermented juice or divine wine by Kubir. We see when we go further down again within the Brahmana Purana, where there's a discourse between Indradev and Brahaspati, asking about Asava, which is actually liquor, and the Brahaspati mentioned different types of wine, and three out of those particular wines would have been the Maduka flowers wine, would have been the rice wine, would be molasses wine, and so forth. So we see where certain aspects, certain doctrines are connected and supporting each other with this aspect. So we see that happening, right? So we know that, okay, wine has been offered, right? We know wine was offered, fermented items and soma, going back to the Rig Veda coming up. We know these things were more or less given. Are they still maintained today? Yes, in certain sectors of worship. In Mariamma worship, in Devi or Kali worship, yes. In Vaishnava worship, no. Vaishnava worship have more or less altered and changed Vedic rituals where had these particular aspects being offered, being and Balidan also, and they maintained that aspect of going more sattvic of nature. They altered and they changed certain elements where they were no longer doing Balidan rituals. They would offer the dry coconut, they would offer bitter gourd and different things in case instead of doing a live balance where the animal is killed, right? Likewise here, they would have changed the item of offering fermented juice, and they would offer dar, they would offer milk or different fruit juices, seasonal fruit juices at that particular time they were doing yajnas instead of offering the fermented items that would change into alcohol. So they could have offered the fresh juice before it was more or less fermented into becoming alcohol or wine. So you saw that. And there was a lot, as I said again, during Vedic times coming up to natural. So from Satya, Treta, Dwapar, there would have been amendments and changes coming up. And one of the days we will go through Vedic rituals and see what would have done and how things were altered and what could have been reasons for things being altered, because there were numerous things that has been altered and changed to maintain a particular aspect of it and omit certain things from it. So we have that again. All right, so we say again now in the Mahanirvana, and there are other tantras that will give doctrines and support to offering fermented items. We have that. So we have that aspect also. So we see in the Mahanirvana, and seeing that we're on the Mahanirvana, we will look at the tantras. In tantric worship, they do support it. They do support it, as in give offering alcohol as prasadam, as more as naividyam, I should be saying, right? To giving Devi that. So in tantric worship, there is that aspect. However, does the items be taken to be given utilized as prasadam? Yes. And in different tantric or agamic um, books, it will state that the consumption of it is as prasadam, meaning minimal, little bit, not as in gluttonous to become drunk and disorderly. Because once it becomes gluttonous and it makes you become disorderly, the prasadam changes consistency and it is no longer what it was before. It is no longer pure of nature and holy and pious as it was made as in the offering. So there are doctrines that gives order that when consumed after it has been offered, it must be done in reverence and respect, and more or smaller quantities, not in large bellows countries that quantities that makes it more or less gluttonous and disorderly. So we see in the mahanirvana, and that is give way to supporting that aspect of tantric. So you would see it in certain aspects of Shivid worship. You will see it in difference of where the Naga sadhus also and the Agoris will do that type of offerings and so forth. You see it done in Madrasi worship. You see it done in Kali worship or Devi worship. As I go further down, when I reach to that video, we're dealing with Kula Devam and so forth, right? And South Indian pantheons, we will break it down even furthermore to see how and when and why and how it came about that we offer that into those type of aspects of worship where you may not have much doctrines or credible doctrines, where we have to rely on folklore and folk arts and folk songs and so forth. And we will go into that as we go along into this series. So we have reached more the tantric aspect via the mahanirvana, showing right, where certain wines, three particular wines were given: Maduka, rice wine, and um, molasses. We see where it is mentioned in the Brahmana Purana by Brahaspati, sage Brahaspati. We have we could more or less consider or think that it would have the one of those three wines were in the cup of Durga Devi when she was on the battlefield fighting Shumanashum and Mahisasur. That particular liquid or those liquids would have been in the cup. So it is more or less it has that thinking, right? So we see here again where now and we see in this aspect the tantric aspect where it is mentioned, right? So going again, these videos is to more or less debunk the myth that these things are unorthodox and these things were more or less non-Vedic or whatever. They were Vedic, they were done in Vedic rituals coming up, and they were altered according, they were altered coming down the road and all and omitted in different aspects of worship, different sectors of worship, and they were maintained by others also. They were still maintained in different aspects of worship, and this is what we are doing. These videos are not to more or less push somebody or send someone into doing these rituals that is not recommended for their aspect of worship. If they don't, even though I said XYZ and it is not of your nature, that doesn't mean you have to do it. Again, this is what these videos are more for educational aspect, to enlighten the individual where certain things or debates are concerned and where scripture comes into play to prove to us or show to us where were these things real, were these things myth, were they a lie, or were they true. Right, so I want to thank you for this particular video. Join me in the next video where we will go now into dealing with folklore, folk arts, folk songs. We are going into Kula Devam, Kaval Devam worship, whatever. These were you didn't have much doctrines and we had to rely on folklore songs, and I will break it down because going to that we break down now and we will reach the part of with many of questions. So we are hearing about wines and alcohol. Fine. Where does cigarette or tobacco comes into play? As we go into that aspect of worship, Kula Devam, Kaval Devam, I will show you how that came into being and the different timelines that it would have been introduced. So please join me for that particular video. Jai Sitaram.